Article 2 of the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America states, "The objects of this society shall be to collect and preserve manuscripts, traditions, relics, and mementos of bygone days, to preserve and restore buildings connected with the early history of our country, to educate our fellow citizens and ourselves in our country's history, to stimulate the spirit of true patriotism and genuine love of country, and to impress upon the young the sacred obligation of honoring the memory of those heroic ancestors."
I'm happy to have today Mary Fitz-Bennett. Mary was accepted in the Colonial Dames in 1974. Her ancestor is Nicholas Falcon Jr. from Virginia. Her mother's family, the Fitz, were longtime residents of Tuscaloosa. A little bit about Mary's background is she attended Hollins College for 1 year, and after graduating from the University of Alabama, she worked for 2 years in New York City and Birmingham. After returning to Tuscaloosa, she earned her master's degree in child development and taught school for many years. Now, Mary, I'd like to ask you a few questions, and I wanted to find out, tell me some of the civic activities that you've been involved in.
After retiring from teaching, I became interested in preservation and worked at the Battle Freedman House on the House Committee. I was chairman for several years, and I persuaded my cousin, Burgess Steeves in Birmingham, who's also a Dame, to contribute my great-grandfather's parlor set to the Battle Freedman House. So that was an exciting time for us. The parlor set is now in the room that's named for him, and it's the James Harris Fitz room. I also served as a docent at the Westfeld Warner Museum of American Art.
Also, I wanted to find out about some of your earliest experiences in the Colonial Dames that you could tell us about.
Well, my mother was a member and cousins in Montgomery and Birmingham, so I was always excited to think that I could be a member, and I enjoyed the state meetings that we had here because I got to see friends from over the state. We had a meeting at the Yacht Club where I was a registrar and did flowers, and we had a meeting at the Jemison House. And I also loved going to the state meetings in Mobile and Birmingham and Selma. I was on a state committee for fundraising for Dunbarton House, and I was assigned Tuscaloosa, and we had 100% participation.
Wow. And these are some of your positions that you held with the Colonial Dames.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
What else have you done with the Colonial Dames?
Another committee worked on finding artisans and artists. At Gorgas Library, we used microfilm and old newspapers to try to locate Alabama artists. In 1960, Fort Jackson was made a historic landmark, and in the 1980s, it became a part of the Alabama Historic Society. In the early 90s, I served as advisor to Fort Jackson for the Colonial Dames, along with a professor from Livingston College. The Alabama Historical Society is having events that show a recreated 1751 French fort, Fort Toulouse, and a partly restored Fort Jackson.
Wow.
Living history events that they are sponsoring include live reenactments from the French and Indian War of 1761. After Jackson defeated the Red Stick Indians, because the White Stick Indians fought with him, and after the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in 1814, Fort Jackson was built.
Wow. Can you tell me more about the living history events? That sounds so fascinating.
They have an Alabama Frontier Day in November, and they have living history weekends each month of the French colonial period and the War of 1812. The Fort Toulouse, the French fort, served as a trading spot for the between them and the French and the Creek Indians.
Wow.
And a nice preservation of our history and a good teaching opportunity for school children and tourists that the Alabama Historical Society is providing. So I'm glad the Dames had a small part in preserving it.
Yeah, that's very important for history in Alabama. You have a beautiful portrait in your home here, and I know it was featured in the Colonial Dames book of portraits. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, the portrait was given to my grandfather, Dr. Austin Fitz, and it is of Sarah Harris Fitz. It was painted in Mobile by what we think was a student of Sully's, and she died not long after that, at age 16, at her home in Roseland in Marico County. Her younger brother, James Harris Fitz, moved with his mother after the father died to Tuscaloosa, where he stayed, and he became a lawyer, and he was awarded or commissioned to be the Confederate States Depository by the Congress of the Confederacy in Montgomery.
Wow. Well, Mary, you have a lot of wonderful information about things the Dames have done in the state, as well as your involvement in that, in the history of your family. Can you just tell me some of your favorite memories of being in the Colonial Dames?
Well, some of my favorite memories are the Sulgrave Manor tours. We had a tour from Barcelona to Rome, and on that trip, the president of the Colonial Dames in the U.S., Teeny Marshall was on that trip, and the people who were on the board went on to Sulgrave Manor after the trip to Rome.
Was that a fundraiser for Sulgrave Manor?
It was a fundraiser, and on this trip also I had a very lucky thing happen. I met Bonnie Jacobs, a dame from San Antonio, who became a lifelong friend.
How neat.
And she publishes a paper of Southern Texas, and she and her husband were publishing it. She had a birthday party for him, and I went with friends. We flew to San Antonio, and on his 80th birthday, we had wonderful tours of ranches and historic homes. And
so you became friends, and you would never have met her had it not been
had
for
it not been for that trip.
How lovely.
We had picnics to ranches and
how
things
fun.
like that. And another Sulgrave Manor trip in 2004 was from St. Petersburg to Moscow, and that was another wonderful trip.
And many people, was unaware that Colonial Dames offered tours like that.
Well, people have told me that they wish we would have some more trips like this.
Gives you a wonderful opportunity for history and connecting with other people across the country.
Right.
They have a common interest.
Right. You meet Dames from all across the country.
Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate your time today. I'm so happy to have with us today two Dames that happen to be first cousins. We have Camille Wright Cook and Camille Maxwell Elebash. They were both accepted in the Colonial Dames in the 50s. Camille Wright Cook was accepted in 1955, and just 2 years later her cousin was in 1957. Their ancestor, they share the same ancestor, was Christopher de Graffenry of North Carolina, that was previously a baron. Their mother's family is the Circes that are longtime residents of Tuscaloosa. Camille Cook, some of her activities in the community include teaching at Auburn University for 20 years and teaching at the University of Alabama Law School for 20 years. During that time, she was Associate Dean of the Law School and was awarded the John S. Stone Professor Emeritus of Law Chair. She also received from the University of Alabama an Outstanding Teaching Award. During her time at the University of Alabama Law School, she helped write a bill concerning adoption that was passed into law. And Camille Maxwell Elebash, some of her activities in the community include owning and operating the graphic newspaper with her husband Carl from 1957 to 1977. It was the first paper in the state of Alabama to print in the offset method. She taught at the University of Alabama for 22 years, teaching journalism, marketing, and advertising. And she was my professor and one of my favorite professors. She was appointed by the Mental Health Department to the Bryce Hospital Historical Preservation Committee, which she is currently serving on. Camille Elebash received the Outstanding 2014 Alabama Alumni of the Year Award. So happy that y'all could share your thoughts on the Colonial Dames together today. And since you both, I wanted to ask some of the questions together, since you both joined the Colonial Dames in the 50s, many of us wanted to find out where the meetings were held and what you wore to the meetings when you first joined.
When I first joined, we met in the members' homes, and everybody wore dresses, hats, and gloves. Very formal.
We're glad that's changed, right? A little more relaxed now. Camille, do you?
I don't remember those, but I remember mostly when we started meeting at Indian Hills every spring and every fall, and then going to Montgomery, or maybe Selma, whichever the headquarters were.
And was the dress attire that formal, or had it relaxed and you didn't have to wear the gloves
Well,
anymore? The hats and the gloves.
They are finally they kind of let you could wear pants, but most people wore dresses in the early years. But it got to be a little more relaxed and not quite as formal.
We could ditch our gloves and hats, right?
Yeah, we didn't have to wear hats.
Another thing, since y'all share the same ancestor, I know you both have many relatives that were in the Colonial Dames. Camille Elebash, who are some of your relatives that are in the Colonial Dames?
Well, my mother and my daughter now afterwards.
And she is a Camille.
My mother-in-law was a member as well.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and of course my husband was an only child, so there were no other descendants there.
Right.
But then, let's see, like I said, my daughter is, and at the moment we're busy processing my granddaughter's papers through Montgomery. She lives in New Orleans, but she's
So that would be
going through
fourth
in Montgomery.
generation. That will be fourth generation Colonial Dames.
Yes.
And your sister is in as well.
My sister's in it, yes.
Yes, so many,
And,
and your first cousin. and Camille Cook, who are
My
some.
daughter, Camille Cook Ashley, and my granddaughter, who lives in California, Camille Cook Ashley,
Wow.
and my niece, Stella Wright Martin.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, all those my immediate family.
And you also have, even though they're not blood, they're still relatives. By marriage, you have two daughter-in-laws that are
That's true.
Colonial Dames. Katie Cook, married to your son Reuben, as well as Martha Cook, married to your son Sidney.
That's
So
right.
both of you, just the two of you have many members in the Colonial Dames right there. And I think that it's wonderful that you carried this on through your family. What do y'all like most about, or what does the Colonial Dames mean to you as far as the importance of this organization?
Yeah. Well, it's really the preservation of historical properties. As you mentioned, as far as my experience is concerned, I was involved with the Rice Hospital during the time they were going to sell the property to the university, and we were quite active and were proud of the fact that we were able to get the university to preserve as much as they are going to preserve of the.
Yeah, I knew you
And the
took a
Colonial.
leading role in that.
Yes, and that was a major, major thing.
Yeah.
It was not part of the Colonial Dames, but it was part of my interest in
History.
preservation. But, of course, I was very much involved with the preservation of the Jemison Van de Graaff house too, starting the first year that it was, the board was created. I was on that for 5 years.
Can you tell me about, does the Colonial Dames have the
Yes,
dining room?
and the Colonial Dames contributed $50,000 to it, to that thing, and we are able now, for 20 years from the time it was done, and I don't remember when exactly, that we have free use of the house once a year for 20 years to have a, some kind of a social or business event. And and of course, Miss Jemison was a very prominent lady, and that was my first real involvement, and also.
Didn't you write a grant for money?
Yes, I wrote a request to the Jemisons who live in Birmingham, and wrote it and asked for, asked for $1 million.
Wow.
And I thought, well, we'll be lucky if we get 100,000. And we ended up with $250,000 from the
Wow.
Jemison Foundation out of Birmingham, which was a godsend because it kept a good roof on the house and
Right, to
preserved a
preserve
lot of it. And they were also, I did a lot of letter writing to family members and got some Cherokee Van de Graaff Randolph out in Tucson. She sent us a desk and a diamond ring and some other
Some other.
things. But we kind of just went around and asked family to donate.
Oh,
And Dr. William Van de Graaff had these paintings of the family, and he had never undone them at all, so he just sent them right back in their crates, and that's where all the family things
That's where
are.
it came.
Yes.
Wow. And are they all preserved in that one dining room in the
Well,
Jemison room?
The dining room table was donated by another Jemison family, the William Jemison family, but then a lot of stuff came from there, and then Henry Johnston out of Birmingham had some connection with them, and he gave us that tremendous mirror that's in the
Yeah, it's
dining
beautiful.
room.
Beautiful.
But the Colonial Dames themselves gave that much money, so we have use for
Oh,
it.
that is lovely. And
And
the
then
whole
Cyn-
community
And then
enjoys that
Cynthia
home.
Thomas donated some Orient rugs too.
Oh, wow.
She was president of the Colonial Dame the state Colonial Dames.
That is so important
Yeah,
to have done that.
yeah.
Camille Cook, what's your favorite part of the Colonial Dames?
I think it's very important to maintain the colonial homes.
Yeah,
And if it were not for this group, I'm sure many of them would have been lost.
I agree. And so many people don't know that the Colonial Dames are behind that.
That's
We
true.
have our State House, the Conde Charlotte, as well as our national homes. Yes.
Yeah.
Do y'all have any other favorite memories of the Colonial Dames that you'd like to share?
I'm just trying to think.
What
It's
about?
always a good party.
And that's important.
Yes, very important. When we have these meetings, we go to some really grand parties in people's homes. Cocktails in one house and dinners in another.
Oh, that's fun. And I bet you've met and become friends with other dames across
All
the
over the
state.
state.
Well, the national president came to the last one that I went to in Montgomery. She was she was a real go-getter.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for not only coming here today, but also your contributions to the community and to the Colonial Dames. And just thank you so much for your service and your time. Thank you.
The National Society of the Colonial Dames of America support and maintain several historic properties, such as the Dumbarton House in Washington, D.C., Gunston Hall Plantation in Virginia, Solgrave Manor in England, and we here in the state of Alabama own and operate the Conde Charlotte Museum House in Mobile, Alabama. On March 13, 1899, the Certificate of Incorporation for the National Society of Colonial Dames of America in the state of Alabama was signed. It was a group of 17 ladies, 2 of which called Tuscaloosa home. The Tuscaloosa Center continues to uphold the principles of the society and has worked to preserve local history such as the Jameson Van de Graaff Mansion, and in 1908 erected a boulder in Tuscaloosa honoring Chief Tuscaloosa. The Colonial Dames from the Tuscaloosa Center will continue to uphold these traditions for future generations.